it's not to say that I'm never going to use food, but so that I'm not teaching my children, like I probably was taught myself, which is food solves everything. So I think that's a big part of it, is just from our earliest memories. Food is all this other stuff. And then that means as adults, we need to kind of unlearn that, and we need to then develop the other coping mechanisms.
Awe Genge, this is Mental Mythos, hosted by Esther.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Mental Mythos. I'm your host, Esther. And before we dive into today's incredible conversation, I have a small favor to ask. If you enjoy what you hear today, please take a moment to rate and review our podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen. Your feedback not only helps us improve, but also helps others discover the valuable insights we share every week. And if you find today's episode particularly inspiring or insightful, don't forget to share it with your friends, family, or anyone you think could benefit from it. Thank you for your support. It truly means the world to us. Now, let's get back into our conversation.
Thank you so much for being here and also replying on my message on Podmatch. I really appreciate it, and being able to talk about the conversation that we're gonna dive into, which is nutrition, exercising, body image, mental health as the main conversation here. So I really appreciate you for being here and accepting my request of having this conversation.
Sounds great. I'm happy to be here. I'm looking forward to it.
And so it's something that many people, I would say, that run away from having that, speaking about the conversation that you are into in terms of nutrition and weight loss. And there are so many things out there that I feel like people are confused who to follow in terms of these different diets of not, if you're not doing this, you will not lose weight. If you're not doing this, you will lose weight. So it's a conflict. So to my understanding, the reason why I started this in terms of helping women to gain their confidence and have that positivity within themselves. You also struggle with your own issues in terms of exercising, nutrition, and body image, something that we all at some point have problem with until we decide to take the thing of, no, I want to try to be better. So can you take us through that? Actually tell the audience how did you feel at that moment, and what was your turning point in terms of wanting to be positive in terms of taking care of your mental health and also taking care of your body?
Yeah, I'm someone who found exercise relatively early in life. I was in high school and I really enjoyed working out, which is, I know, something that not a lot of people feel. My struggle came from linking exercise and nutrition in my mind and feeling like I had to try to compensate if I ate a lot of, quote unquote, bad foods, or try to make up for, what I'd eaten. They were just really intertwined, rather than exercising because it's good for me and it makes me feel good and it's good for my mental health. There was a lot of, I'm working out so that I can eat more, or I ate a lot, so now I need to work out. And that was just a really unhealthy pairing. And it took me a long time to break out of that cycle, because what would end up happening is I would, be quote unquote good for a few days, and I'd be really strict with myself, and I had certain foods that I wouldn't allow myself to eat, and I felt good when I when I was being strict, because I felt like the restriction was almost like a badge of honor. And like I had to be so strict in order to be successful. But what would happen then is I'd get a few days in, usually, Monday through Thursday, and the weekend would hit. And I would just feel like, well, you've been really good all week. You deserve to indulge a bit. And that was when I went into like the very textbook cycle of binging and restricting and getting myself to a point where I would intentionally eat, have like a cheat type meal, but then I would beat myself up about it. And I would tell myself that I had already blown it, in which case I might as well get it out of my system now so that then starting Monday, I would never do it again. And it just went around and around for a really long time. And you asked about kind of what was the turning point is I remember I was sitting in my living room after another kind of episode, and I was feeling really badly about myself and was just like, I need to stop doing this. But it was so hard to remember in the moment. My brain was just like, that'll taste good. And this time you just won't eat way too much. And what I ended up doing was writing a note to myself and just kind of putting to paper exactly how I was feeling, how physically ill I felt, how mad at myself I was, just all the negative feelings that were in my head at that time. And, like the next day when I had the desire to do it again, I was able to pull it back up and read it in my own words. And I knew this is how I'm going to feel in an hour if I choose to do this again. And I just kind of started experimenting with, could I just, no matter how hard it is, could I just this one night, could I not do it? And when I woke up the next morning and felt so proud of myself, I did the same thing. I wrote myself another note talking about how good it felt to have just resisted the temptation and not done it. And it's not to say that I still don't, slip up from time to time, but what it did was help me become more aware of kind of the choice that I was faced with and the fork in the road and how I would feel based on what I chose to do. And it allowed me to practice pausing rather than just reacting to those feelings and those desires. And I became better able to remind myself of how I wanted to feel and to know that it was up to me to make myself feel that way or make myself feel worse. And it's just been sort of an ongoing practice since then that has gotten better and easier. So as a result, my binging and my restricting has become a lot less severe and disruptive. It's a lot fewer and further between when it does happen. And I'm much better able to notice kind of when I'm doing it and be like, okay, well, let's just pump the brakes here. You can't undo what you just did, but you can decide to stop going forward. And that makes a huge difference.
And I feel like as people, when we have those, I would say, unhealthy habits and we try to justify them as much as we could just to make ourselves feel better. And there's this quote this saying that I once saw on Ken for Panda. It was said by Poe to Tai Long, I think so, where he said that there is no secret ingredient. And that's how we are, where, as I mentioned about losing weight or just changing your life, we always want that secret ingredient of saying that, okay, how about I follow this path? How about I do this? But you're not realizing that the work starts with yourself. And it really starts with yourself. That's what I have seen with myself and the guests that I have previously interviewed here on this podcast. And we spoke about food in terms of binge eating. So how do you create that positive relationship with food as someone that has tried making it easier for yourself to, I would say, not fall too much on the temptations?
I think it's important to remind yourself that there are no good and bad foods. You are allowed to eat any food regardless of its nutritional content. But that what it boils down to is how you want to feel, how you want your body to perform, what you want it to look like, and that the choices that you make in terms of your nutrition make a difference in those things. That it's not about being perfect. It's about really being pretty good most of the time and being intentional with your choices. It's very easy. We live in such food-centric environments that it's so easy to eat when you're not hungry, to eat these ultra-processed, highly palatable foods that just taste good and are hard to stop eating, but aren't satiating and aren't giving our bodies, anything in terms of nutrients. It's very easy to just mindlessly overeat. So I think it's really important to take notice of those things and get in touch with your body, your hunger and fullness cues. Start asking yourself, am I physically hungry right now? And a good test for that, I use it with my 5-year-old all the time, is like, a person who is truly hungry will eat what is available. So if you're saying like, oh no, I don't want that salad, or I don't want chicken right now, I only want the cookie, or I only want the pizza, well, you're probably not truly hungry. Because no really hungry person is saying no to food. So oftentimes it's that either we saw it and we want it because we know it would taste good, or we're feeling some sort of emotion that we have just gotten in the habit of avoiding with something like food. So a lot of times you need to kind of start exploring other coping mechanisms. You need to be able to pinpoint and name your emotions and say, you know what? Yeah, I'm not physically hungry because I know what that feels like, but I am sad or lonely or anxious or I'm overwhelmed. And then once you know the emotion that you're feeling, to get comfortable either just sitting with it and feeling that way and not using food to cope, or addressing it in some different and healthier way. And as you start to see food, yes, as, pleasure and culture and bonding and all sorts of things, but also food is fuel. And as you start to remind yourself that the way I eat directly impacts how I feel, what I'm able to do. And when you realize I want to feel good, I want to be able to do things, and my nutrition can help me or prevent me from doing those things, you are better able to then strike a balance where most of the time you're eating for performance, you're eating for health, you're eating for the nutrients. And yeah, some of the times you're eating because it tastes good, you're celebrating, you're making memories. It's an event, but it takes practice to do that. And I think a lot of people just want to kind of skip over the hard work and get to the better relationship with food and their bodies right away. And like, you just can't skip the hard work. That is what creates the new relationship, is putting in the work, the reps, and learning as you go.
Yeah, and I also agree with you in terms of that. And for some people, it's quite difficult to put on the work and being able to say no. Actually, the problem is of saying no, because the no is quite difficult for other people. If I say no, how will I feel in terms of that? And I want to focus on that in terms of, you mentioned coping mechanism. As having a 15 years experience within the health and wellness, I would say, industry, what has shown you that the reason why people tend to go into that food binging or creating that coping mechanism when it comes to food?
It's really interesting. I think a lot of it is learned behavior. And as I said, I'm a parent of a young child who's 5. And even though I am very aware of how we talk about food, how we talk about exercise, all of that, I still notice how easy it is to use food for comfort and for reward and for things besides hunger. An example being, when he has to get his vaccinations before school. Of course, the poor kid's dreading it. He doesn't want to go get his arm stabbed. He's super upset. And, one of the first things I say is, well, let's go get an ice cream afterward, because that's something he'll enjoy. And he will enjoy it, but already we're sort of planting the seed that when you feel bad, food will make you feel better. And in and of itself, that's not a problem, as long as it's not the only coping mechanism that you have. So that's something as a parent I try to be aware of, and I think would serve us all, is to think about what are other things that will make me feel better, would make my kids feel better, so that it's not to say that I'm never going to use food, but so that I'm not teaching my children, like I probably was taught myself, which is food solves everything. So I think that's a big part of it, is just from our earliest memories. Food is all this other stuff. And then that means as adults, we need to kind of unlearn that. And we need to then develop the other coping mechanisms, like I'm going to actually go out and take a walk instead of being around the kitchen where I'm going to be tempted, or let me call a friend and vent about this or talk about how I'm feeling.